All right. So we've talked about this a couple times before about how your metabolic health and your mental health are directly connected. And the easiest way to explain this is to talk about, if you've ever met anybody or if you've ever personally been hangry, where you get so hungry, you get angry. So what ends up happening is your nutritional needs are not met. And so your nutritional needs start to collapse. Your nutritional metabolic function starts to collapse. And your psychological emotional needs also start to collapse. You go from happy, fun, jokey, everybody's happy, to grumpy, short, pissy, mean, angry, tired, like those are the things. When you feed that person, your metabolic needs come back up. You satisfy these metabolic nutritional needs, and all of a sudden your psychological emotional needs come back up to where they're supposed to be as well. There's been a bunch of research on this. Dr. Palmer from Harvard has done a bunch of research on this, taking depression, schizophrenia, OCD, like all sorts of different things, and fixing them. Now he's usually mostly a keto diet, which is great. Keto diets are fantastic. They've had, oh my God, there's more research on keto diets than any other diet on the planet. Because we found out, like hundreds of years ago that it resolves epilepsy all the time. It is the number one treatment for epilepsy. In fact, it's funny because like medical literature, it's like, no, it's not the best. It's the best treatment for drug-resistant epilepsy. All right, so what that really means is that when nothing works, when drugs don't work, when nothing we know how to function works, if you then go to the keto diet, most of the time keto diets will resolve epilepsy and stuff like that, which in my opinion tells you that it should be your primary source, or at least we should start looking at metabolic function a lot sooner. But pharmaceuticals make a ton more money. So that's actually why we do it that way. But this is something I think we should try to take into account, if your doctor's not going to tell you this, because remember, your doctor's been educated by the system. They've been educated by the FDA, by the CDC, by the NIH, the guys who, made COVID, the guys who lied about masks, the guys who lied about vaccines, the guys who lied about all that stuff. That's who they were taught by. So their job is to get you on as many pharmaceuticals as possible, not actually help your health. Doctors are trying their very best. They're doing great jobs. They're phenomenal human beings, but the information they're given was by a corrupt system that's trying to, make you sick as hell so you can buy more drugs. So that's where that is. We start looking at people who've gone carnivore or gone keto or gone, processed free or sugar free, whatever. And they've cut all the processing, they cut all the stuff that man has done to food. They cut as much of that out as they could. And every single time, even veganism, every single time that we've taken the stuff that man has done to our food out of our food supply, everybody gets healthier every time. Again, it's carnivore, it's veganism, it's it's paleo, it's all of them. The Daniel fast. Like no matter what you talk about, like there's this great diet, and at the core of it, it's natural, whole, real foods, and people get healthy. So one of the things everybody needs to kind of recognize is that your body was designed in an unbelievably beautiful, perfect way. And if we can just get back to original design, you're going to be fine. You don't need the drugs. You don't need all those things. One of the things we do need to kind of make sure we classify is what is a pharmaceutical, what is a drug, and what is not. If your body is used to having it, if your body produces it or did at one time produce it, it's not a drug. It's a physiological tool. So for instance, testosterone, not a drug. Man didn't make testosterone. God made testosterone. So when we put testosterone in the body, all of a sudden things start getting better. I've had a lot of women tell me, like when we start doing hormone therapy with them, specifically with testosterone, they come back and they tell me they're not as crazy. And I go, what do you mean by that? And they're like, well, I don't, they have more energy. They're not as mentally, they're not as chaotic. They don't, they don't swing back and forth. They don't have these big emotional swings, and like things are just coming easier. And they're just like, oh, something happens. All right, I'll deal with it. And that's been one of the things I've heard over and over and over from women, that adding the testosterone makes them less crazy. And this is what they're saying. I'm not calling women crazy. These particular women are telling me they just feel like they're less crazy. But we see it all the time. We see more energy. One of the number one treatments for depression is testosterone, especially in men. And so when we start looking at what we need to get the body back to function, that's a really big one. We look at energy levels. We talk about, iron. One of my favorite things is that I get people in here all the time with thyroid issues. And they're like, yeah, my doctor told me I need to be on this thyroid med or that thyroid med or, whatever. And half the time the doctors pull the wrong labs because they only pull TSH or TSH and T4, which is irrelevant to full function. But they're always wanting to throw them on drugs. Well, here's the thing that nobody ever asks them. How much iodine is in your diet? Like, look at your foods. Like, here's what I ate for the past week. Just look it up. Like, how much iodine is in what you ate? Guys, T3, which is the active form, which is only 20% of what's in your blood, requires 3 iodines. T3, 3 iodines. T4, 4 iodines. And 80% of the thyroid hormones you guys make, we all make, is T4. So if you don't have enough iodine, you can't make the thyroid hormone. And so instead of everybody jumping on this, we got to go and levothyroxine, we got to get on, this or that or whatever, Synthroid or whatever, or Armor. Have you tried eating, increasing your consumption of iodine? I've done this with lots and lots of patients, and their thyroid levels got better. So again, if we start looking at what we're bringing into the body, that's going to be really, really beneficial. Again, we have a lot of people who have energy issues, have mental stuff, all sorts of things because their iodine is low, their thyroid levels are low. Thyroid levels are directly connected to IQ in gestation, babies and stuff like that. So we need to bring those up. So when we start talking about, fatigue, we start talking about brain fog, we start talking about, depression, we start talking about psychosis, we start talking about anxiety, we start talking about, OCD, all of these things. These are all directly tied to our metabolic function. So, if we can get those things back online, we'll be way better off. Dementia is a great one to look at because dementia is directly tied to insulin resistance, which is why they call it type 3 diabetes. And diabetes itself is another great way to look at it because a lot of that stuff decays brain tissues like that. So if we're looking at our issues, specifically our mental health problems, and we're like, well, where should we start? You've got to start with the metabolic function. What are these people eating? What are they lacking? A lot of people, if we just move them over, give them the testosterone, give them more amino acids, typically from meat, we see a lot of these things start to go away. But the biggest thing we see is that when we start cleaning up the diet and getting the processed trash chemicals out, everybody does better. If you've been or somebody who's been to Europe, specifically Italy, and they ate all the bread, they drank all the wine, they ate all the ice cream, they all things, and they came back, they lost weight, they feel better. I've had people like, I could breathe. Like my sinuses were clear, like everything was great. And it was great for about 2-3 days, after I got back. Yeah, because we're being poisoned here. So a lot of the things that we're worried about from a mental health standpoint, a lot of them, not all of them, but about, I would say 70 to 80% of them could be fixed if we change our metabolic function. So when we start looking at the country, start looking at ourselves, we start looking at our family and being like, man, what's going on with our mental health? We've got this massive, look at all the shootings. Look at all, and all those kids are on SSRIs. We've got a lot of, trans people committing horrible crimes, specifically against kids. And a lot of that is mental health. Well, if we look at, what's going on chemically, look at the vaccines, look at the processed foods, look at the chronic, light, EMF stimulation from phones and from 5G and stuff like that. Like all of these things do matter. So if we're looking at cleaning up our mental health, we're looking at cleaning up all those things. If we focus more on metabolic function, we're going to feel better, we're going to look better, we're going to have healthier lives, and we're going to have much higher mental health function. So if you're worried about that, if that's something that's going on with your kids, if you're worried about that with your kids or whatever, that's going to be the biggest thing. And if you're like, well, where do we start? Easy. Start replacing all your foods and start getting as many of this processed stuff out as you can. If it comes in a box or it comes in a bag, it's probably bad. And you don't have to be perfect about it, especially at the beginning. Just start taking some of these things out, like processed sugars and things like that. Take Coca-Cola away and go to something like stevia or Zevia, or go to, even poppy, or just like radically decrease the sugars. Like take that step. So those are going to be some of those things that you guys can start doing is the less processed trash that's in your food, the less junk your brain and your body has to try to deal with and filter out, because the chemicals that man has made don't work in the body. If you give the stuff that is naturally occurring, our bodies do really well with that because we're naturally occurring. So that's where I would start. But there's a whole bunch more if you guys are looking at that. And I will tell you, if you're going to do, the 4 hormones you got to worry about the most are testosterone, estrogen, glucagon, and insulin. You can do that with testosterone injections or testosterone. You can raise testosterone in a number of different ways. And then, fix the glucagon and insulin issues with either diet or peptides. Retatrutide would be my primary goal for fixing metabolism. But That's where all of this lives. So if you're worried about mental health, look at metabolism first. Have a fantastic day. Thanks for your time.